Hello friends, Hunter King here with the National Association for Gun Rights, popping in with a few updates from Washington, D.C. I want to start with the newly dropped executive order from the Biden-Harris administration. Yet again, another gun control executive order. Basically, the sky is falling and they are taking all of your guns. Not really, but you would be forgiven if you had listened to candidate Kamala Harris speak and preach about confiscating your firearms over the last 6 months, year, 10 years, 20 years, basically ever since she's walked planet Earth. Now, there are some disturbing provisions and language within this executive order. Yet again, the administration doubling down on some of the bipartisan Safer Community Act's provisions. Remember the most egregious gun legislation we've seen in the past 30 years? That some of your favorite and most well-informed senators told you would not diminish the Second Amendment at all? Yes, it's back again for more. So let's get into it. One key aspect of this executive order is the creation of a task force aimed to assess emerging firearm threats. And I want to use their own words when I read this to you. This task force is to issue a report in 90 days on the threat of machine gun conversion devices and unrealized 3D printed firearms. This includes an assessment of agencies' operational and legal capacities to detect, intercept, and seize handgun conversion devices and unrealized 3D printed firearms. So what are they actually saying here? Well, in our eyes, they're admitting that they no longer have the power and authority to define what a machine gun is. Congress has already done that. We beat them up in the Fifth Circuit. Thanks to NAGR members like you, we won. We've continued to win. Now, the administration is realizing they no longer can arbitrarily do this through the rulemaking process. They have now pinged Congress and told them to supply us with a report and give us the power to do what we need to do what we want to do, and that's to arbitrarily decide what and what is not a machine gun. And they actually say it right in this executive order, and I want to read to it from you right here. A single engagement of the trigger up to 20 bullets in 1 second. So they want to create this task force, this study committee, to give them the power to decide what a machine gun is, but they're actually already outlining it in this executive order. Again, they understand they cannot do this through the rulemaking process anymore, so they are using the power of Congress to get done what they haven't been able to get done because we've beat them in the Fifth Circuit, we've beat them in Chevron, and we've beaten them in Cargill. Force reset triggers and bump stocks are safe for now, but we will see what they come out with. Another interesting aspect of this executive order is the language detailed in this outlining how they can improve active shooter drills within schools. Now, this is just nonsense and hypocrisy because if you've watched Kamala Harris, again, over the past 6 months to a year, speak on this subject, she actively has said she does not want armed guards or real solutions to stop mass shootings within schools. Watch this clip.
And then also, again, what we need to do about demilitarizing our schools and taking police officers out of schools.
Now, some of the real meat of this executive order, in our opinion, is the doubling down on the implementation of state red flag laws. The Department of Justice has announced over $135 million in formula awards to 48 states under the Burn State Crisis Intervention Program, which provides funding for the implementation of extreme risk protection orders or red flag orders or ex parte hearings. Now, this was all brought to you by the bipartisan Safer Communities Act legislation that we saw John Cornyn work vigorously to pass 2 years ago. Let's do a little deeper dive into the states receiving these red flag grant programs. Obviously, we can predict the usual suspects. New York, New Jersey, California leads the pack at almost $30 million. But what's very interesting is some of these pro-gun states, states with constitutional carry, red states we like to think of, they are receiving tens of millions of dollars in red flag grant programs. States like Georgia, Utah, and of course, Texas, which is actually second only behind California and red flag grant programs. Everybody likes to proclaim their state's a red state, a conservative state, a pro-gun state, but we know money talks and we have the proof to back it up. So why is it such a big deal if states are receiving this red flag grant money? Well, because they could potentially use it to enact the model legislation that this administration has put forth to dump more records, including those of juveniles, into the NICS background check system. Now, this is all thanks to the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And I want to read some of the juvenile provisions within that egregious legislation that was passed just 2 years ago. Strips gun rights for crimes committed while underage, applies retroactively to all gun owners. Bans gun possession for adults based on previous juvenile mental health care. Makes it much more difficult for 18 to 20-year-olds to purchase any firearm, and spends $300 million to dump juvenile records into the NICS background check system. This was all language from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act used as model legislation now for these red flag grant programs into these states. And we know for a fact, once the federal government obtains these records, including records of juveniles, they never destroy them. Contrary to what they'll tell you, they never destroy them, and we have this in proof. Rep. Andrew Clyde of Georgia traveled to West Virginia, caught ATF red-handed, digitizing upwards of 1 billion records. Watch this clip.
The ATF is not above the law, and we must ensure that they are not operating outside the law. While out-of-business federal firearms licensees are required to turn in their records to ATF, the ATF is not permitted to record these records. Yet in 2022, the ATF spent almost $10.2 million to receive, digitize, and store out-of-business records. In 2023, the estimate was almost $10.3 million. The language of the law is very clear to me. The law allows them to keep the records and to organize the records and to inquire into the records, but it does not allow them to record the records or any part of the records in any way. By their own admission, ATF is recording these records in digital form.
Speaking of Andrew Clyde, friend of the program and one of the most pro-gun members of Congress, his resolution to nullify Biden's engaged in business rule, HJ Res 144, just passed House Judiciary Committee 9-14. Now, again, you're probably asking yourself, why is this of concern now? Why are we doing this now? Why is there a push for this now? We don't have a pro-gun Senate. We don't have a pro-gun president. Well, because, as we've noted before, these are long-term plays. We gin up support now. We gin up pressure now. We bring light to the issue now. So in 2025, when hopefully we have a pro-gun House, a pro-gun Senate, and a pro-gun president, we can see this bill pass both chambers and be signed into law and nullify the egregious engaged in business rule, which, you may remember, basically gave ATF a blank check to say you are a firearms dealer, with no minimum threshold of number of firearms purchased or sold that triggers the licensing requirement. No number of transactions that determines whether a person is engaged in the business of dealing in firearms. Another arbitrary rule set forth by ATF to enhance background checks and implement universal gun registration. We again thank Andrew Clyde for this legislation and hope to see it moved in 2025. Now, I understand a lot of this may seem dry at times, and this is another attempt by the Democrats to kill us with 1,000 cuts. It's what they're great at. But I also understand the average NAGR member is not your standard gun owner. They're informed. They do the work. They pick up the phone. They call their member. They call their senator. They oppose legislation. They support legislation. They do their research. They look at who's receiving these red flag grant funds. This is the way it's always worked. This is how we've always won. Staying informed, to be activists, to win the ground game. We're going to continue to inform you, and you guys are going to continue to work. That's how we win.